Happy New Year and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 TV Shows of 2016. So I'm recording this video on what is for me New Year's Day of 2017 while I look back on my favorite shows of 2016. So this is a video I think about all year, even though I know it's not one of my more popular videos. It's one I think of the most. As I watch these shows throughout the years, I often wonder where they will rank on my end of the year top 10. So if you know my channel, you know I only watch a few shows and only watch what I deem high quality shows. I don't watch reality shows or most boring and network shows, or don't really watch any comedy shows for that matter. I tend to stick with serialized dramas, mostly on subscription cable channels like HBO and internet subscription services like Netflix, but it's not limited to that, as I watch anything that's recommended or that looks good. So the thing that will set this video apart from the one I did last year is that I watch a lot more shows this year than I did the previous year. Last year, all the shows I watched that year were included on my list, whereas this year I've seen a lot more shows, so not all of them will be included in this video. There were just so many I couldn't fit them all in, which means the competition was a lot stiffer this year and a lot harder to boil down. So yes, here it is. The best shows of 2016. Now, for this list, I look at specific seasons of shows and has a rule the season needed to end in 2016 in order to be included in this list. For example, with The Walking Dead, only season 6 is eligible for the list, even though the first half of season 6 aired in 2015. It completed its run in 2016. So I look at all of the season 6, even the part that aired in 2015, rather than judging like the second half of season 6 and the first half of season 7, which also means that season 7 is not eligible for the list because it's not finished yet. Likewise, unfortunately, this means Vikings won't be eligible for this list, even though 10 episodes aired last February to April for season 4. Technically, season 4 hasn't finished yet, as the second half of season 4 just started last month and won't be finished until next February. So even though the vast majority of Vikings season 4 aired in 2016, it's going to have to be counted as a 2017 show, and so on and so forth. So, as I often like to do in my top 10 videos, I'll start with a negative list, but rather than doing a worst TV show list, which wouldn't really work because I don't watch shows that I don't like, I do my top 3 most disappointing shows of 2016. So this is a list where I count down shows that had seasons in 2016 that failed to live up to the greatness set by its previous seasons. So shows that I know can be good, but the season that aired in 2016 was subpar to what came before it. So my number 3 most disappointing show of 2016 is The X-Files Season 10. And they did officially call it Season 10. I had high hopes for this show as I've been waiting for over a decade for it to return. The show concluded its 9th season in 2001 and left it on a sort of a cliffhanger that was definitely the showrunner's intention to finish the story in films. But what happened was we waited 7 years for a standalone film that didn't resolve the cliffhanger in any way that, oh, by the way, totally sucked. So Chris Carter promised the whole time, oh, the mythology will be resolved eventually. So when I heard they were doing a short 6-episode run, I thought it would be great, as it would be short, concise, and cut out all the fat and unnecessary bits that the original series had, and while resolving loose threads. But instead, what we got were 5 standalone stories that kept a lot of the fat and unnecessary bloated nonsense that the original series had, that completely rewrote the mythology rather than resolving it, to the point where the mythology episodes that were typically my favorites of the show were by far the worst part of this sequel season. I mean, either reboot it or don't. If you're going to rewrite history and pretend 9 seasons worth of mythology never happened, then just reboot the whole thing with like young actors playing Mulder and Scully. I would have rather much that they do that rather than bringing back the old actors just to pretend that what came before didn't happen. And oh yes, this very, 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 very hokey and ridiculous bringing the cigarette smoking man back to life after we saw his whole body explode on screen. I mean, come on, it's nonsense. The whole season wasn't terrible, though. There were a few good episodes, and as always, an overrated comedy episode that was actually just okay. But yeah, overall, I'd say that this season was a huge disappointment. Coming in at number 2 for most disappointing is Fear the Walking Dead Season 2. Those who saw my top 10 list from last year know that this show made my favorite list. Even when it was getting a lot of hate, I defended the show as being an original character-based show that actively set itself apart from the original Walking Dead show. While this season they throw all that away by trying too hard to be like the main show, which only results in inheriting all of its problems. It just came off as too slow-paced, boring, and literally kept repeating the exact same storylines that have already been done several times on the main show. Those that saw my review for the mid-season finale will know that that episode sent me into a furious rage, as it was just so bad, as it completely ruined every interesting character they had with an unoriginal plot that was just a blatant rehash of several stories that we've already seen on the main show. However, the second half of the season did improve slightly, with several storylines that were powerful, but overall ended in a sort of typical manner, and not all of the storylines were good, so it didn't quite save it for me, making it an overall disappointing season. And my number 1 most disappointing show of 2016 is The Walking Dead Season 6, which shouldn't come as a surprise for those who've seen my reviews on the show. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that The Walking Dead was worse than Fear the Walking Dead this year, but it was most definitely more disappointing. The Walking Dead was coming off what was, in my opinion, the best season they had was Season 5, and for the most part was Season 6 was just a bunch of pointless filler that follow boring side characters that we don't really care about, and we know that they're going to die soon anyway. And while a lot of people were raving about the start of the season, I was just way too overwhelmed with far too many characters. I couldn't really latch on to anything. And then it had a very contrived, ridiculous, drawn-out introduction of the new villains, the Saviors, that relied too heavily on already being aware of who these characters were from the source material, rather than having the show stand on its own. And it relied on cheap gimmicks, such as a fake-out death that was so contrived and fake, it would eventually become a shorthand on the internet to describe a contrived death that sucks. And this all ends on the worst cliffhanger of all time from any TV show that was so incredibly fucking contrived. I really couldn't believe it. Season 6 was the year The Walking Dead worried less about telling good stories and more about creating internet buzz, making it by far the most disappointing show of 2016. So enough of the negativity, let me get to my favorite shows of 2016. And again, let me say this was a hard list to compile because there were a lot of great shows this year. So let me start off by naming some honorable mentions that didn't quite make my top 10 list, but were great shows worth mentioning. First honorable mention is House of Cards Season 4. House of Cards was at the top of my most disappointing shows list last year, and I stated that I was close to giving up on the show entirely. However, they really managed to turn the show around and make it so powerful, and with some really shocking episodes that totally blew me away. Although I will say it did dip in quality in the second half of the season and didn't have a very strong finish, but for the most part it was a great season worth mentioning. Next honorable mention is Black Mirror Season 3. Now, like many others, I just discovered Black Mirror this year, and I have to say I thought Season 3 was the weakest out of the three, as it had several episodes I thought fumbled their endings, but for the most part, it was still a very powerful and provocative season that, like always, gets you to re-examine modern culture and the role technology plays. And this message still comes off very strongly in season 3, which did have a couple of very strong, thought-provoking episodes. And my final honorable mention is Stranger Things Season 1. Stranger Things was a big hit in 2016 overall, as the buzz around this show was enormous, and I can certainly see why. It contained interesting stories, great acting, very memorable characters, and of course it managed to capture 80s nostalgia perfectly, much better than any film or show has done before, as it had very strong Steven Spielberg and Stephen King feels to it. However, the reason it's not higher on my list, as it would surely be for a lot of other people, is because it kind of dipped in quality towards the end, and the ending wasn't very remarkable, but it was still a very strong entry in 2016. So now getting to my top 10 favorite TV shows of 2016, starting with my number 10, Dark Matter Season 2. Now, Dark Matter is a low-budget sci-fi space drama that I didn't think too highly of in its first year. Even though I gave it a positive rating, I was still more harsh on it than many fans would have preferred. But I will say I was completely blown away by how much it improved in Season 2. It's as if the showrunners took every complaint that I had about the show and addressed it, as I thought the characters, at first I thought the characters came off as stereotypical cliches, and in Season 2 they were more developed, given rich backstories and character traits that made them really stand out. And in Season 1 I thought they didn't do a good job with world building, and it felt like a generic future space universe. Season 2 when it strives to develop the world and its surrounding and make it a more tangible universe. And overall it just had better, more exciting, more interesting stories with a few really badass moments that really blew me away. Although it wasn't perfect, as there were a few storylines I thought it kind of fumbled and a few episodes that were a bit subpar. Overall, a vast improvement on Season 1 with a very strong ending, making it one of my favorite shows of 2016. Coming in at number 9 is Orphan Black Season 4. Orphan Black was another show that was on my most disappointing list last year, and another show that totally managed to pull itself around. It is yet another example of a show that seemed to address every concern that I had about the previous season and improved upon it. It made a very brave and risky move by having the first episode of the season set entirely in the past before Season 1 even began, which was really risky indeed, as it set the stage for Season 4, and overall it helped the show get back to its roots. It abandoned a lot of the convoluted and ridiculous storylines in favor of ones that were more grounded in reality, that allowed its rich cast of characters to shine. The overall story of the season was great, not too hard to follow, allowing for some really great moments. That being said, it did have some downsides, including the storyline involving Rachel, and the ending wasn't the best, but overall a great season and a huge improvement on the previous year. Coming in at number 8 is Mr. Robot Season 2. Mr. Robot has been a personal favorite of mine since it first came out last year, but it didn't rank as high this year, as I felt Season 2 wasn't quite as powerful as Season 1, and apparently that's a common sentiment with a lot of people jumping off the show entirely and saying that Season 2 sucked. Well, I don't agree with that at all, and on the other hand, you have a few loyal fans saying that not only Season 2 was better than Season 1, but it outshined shows like Game of Thrones. Well, I think that's going way too far in the opposite direction. After I watched Season 2 of Mr. Robot, my first thought wasn't, wow, Season 2 was awesome. More like, wow, looks like Season 3 is going to be awesome. In other words, Season 2 felt more like a setup season, a cog in the machine, which is fine as long as the later seasons deliver. Although I think because it did so little to push the story forward, I thought it should have been shorter rather than longer, as the first 6 episodes moved far too slow and could have easily been been condensed into 3 episodes. That being said, I still love Mr. Robot overall, as it's some of the highest production values and best acting on all of television, which is why I'd rank a subpar season higher than a good season of a show like Dark Matter or Orphan Black, because it is overall a better show with a smart storyline, fascinating characters, and it did have a very strong ending, even if it did meander a bit in the beginning. I'd say Mr. Robot featured the best cinematography and editing of any show this year, including Better Call Saul, Westworld, or even Game of Thrones. And that is a really bold statement indeed. So much so, I hope you see why I ranked it as high as I did despite my complaints. Coming in at number 7 is Black Sails Season 3. Black Sails is another show I first watched the whole thing of this year, and it was Season 2 that really blew me away, but unfortunately I hadn't watched it yet when I did my top 10 for 2015, otherwise that would have surely made my top 5. Season 3 wasn't quite as good as that, but still a powerful season in its own right. It did get off to a bad start by completely glossing over the cliffhanger Season 2 ended on by starting the season with it already resolved off screen. And as annoying as that was, the season did make up for it with a much stronger second half, as it pit all the friends who were old friends against each other as the English tried to take over the island, while Captain Flint gained some more interesting new allies in his bid to make the island an independent pirate nation. And the season introduced the great character of Blackbeard, who we've been waiting to see, as well as making strides to progress John Silvers to the pirate that we all know and love. So overall, a very powerful season that I very much enjoyed. My number 6 is Westworld Season 1, another show that generated a ridiculous amount of buzz, as it seemed everyone was ready to declare this the best show ever after watching 5 minutes of it. While I personally found such conclusions a bit overzealous, especially considering the very slow and not so good start to the season, overall, I found once the season was over, it did deliver on the high quality that everyone promised it had. Not only with amazing production values in cinematography, editing, acting, and music, but also rich and complex stories that really make you think. By the end of it, if you looked on the whole season totally different, which makes you want to go back and watch it all over again. And those are by far my favorite kinds of shows and films. So for me, it makes up for the slow pace of the first half of the season and the fact that many of its human characters aren't nearly as fleshed out as they should be. As overall, it's a very smart, well thought out, brilliantly put together show that really delivers. Number 5 on my list is The Expanse Season 1. Now, I may be a bit biased when it comes to The Expanse, as I've always wanted a show or film to be based in a future where our solar system has been colonized and different cultures and governments that span that solar system have been established. And I've been waiting almost a decade for the Sci-Fi Channel to release a spiritual successor to Battlestar Galactica, and I've been thinking about how great it would be to have a Game of Thrones style series set in space, and The Expanse delivers on all of those things with a very strong first season. This show features some of the best world building I've ever seen since Game of Thrones, which I'm sure is in no small part due to the fact that it's based off of a series of novels that it follows really closely, but you really feel like you're visiting this universe that has a rich backstory and mythology. And to be honest, sometimes it's a little too intricate and hard to follow, but mostly it just adds to the realism of the show, as it follows multiple storylines, one of a detective noir type storyline, one of a political intrigue storyline, and one of a classic space opera storyline. The Expanse really delivers on rich characters and a rich universe with great mysteries to keep you guessing, making it a very memorable season of 2016. Coming in at number 4 is Narcos Season 2. Last year I heard a lot of buzz on how great Narcos was, and I was planning on watching it, but kept putting it off until finally I heard season 2 was coming out, so I decided to just watch the two of them together. And to be honest, I have a hard time differentiating between the two seasons as they flow perfectly into one another, and to be clear, I think that is a very good thing. Narcos was such a great show. Once I started watching it, I couldn't stop as I watched both seasons in just under 5 days and never got too slow or boring and kept up with a good pace. Season 2 was a bit more slow paced than season 1 as it spanned over a much shorter time frame. However, this allowed the show to flesh the characters out more, and season 2 introduced some new characters and focused a bit more on some familiar ones who didn't get enough play in season 1, so it helped to enrich this really great show that is based off of real life events. And personally, I'd pick Narcos over most rise and fall of gangster stories like Scarface, Goodfellas, or Casino, but that's just me. I absolutely love this show. My number 3 is Humans Season 2. Now, this is yet to be released in the US, but finished airing in its origin country of the UK, as well as a few other countries, including New Zealand, the country I live in, so I decided to include it in 2016. Humans ranked high on my list last year, as well as I remember being impressed with how consistent the pace of the season was, and while I wasn't quite as impressed with the pace this year, as it did meander a little bit in the mid-season, overall I was far more impressed with this season as it really raises the stakes and adds another layer of tension that it didn't have in season 1 that for me just made the show much more interesting. The best thing about Humans, which admittedly doesn't have as high of a production value as many of the other shows on my list, is its strong characters who are really realistic and shine through. In fact, so much so that I'd say this show about robots being used all around the world coming alive is the most realistic show I've watched all year, and its character stories are just so rich. And I was reminded of how amazing an actor Carrie-Anne Moss is, who has been in my favorite movie Memento. She was featured this season and did an amazing job, particularly in a scene in the final episode that was just amazing. And overall, the season had a really strong finish that left a huge impression on me, so I want very badly for there to be a season 3, as I believe they can up the quality even more. But overall, I was pretty blown away by season 2, making it my third favorite show of 2016. Coming in at number 2 on my list is Better Call Saul Season 2. For those Walking Dead fans who might have been thinking I hate slow-paced dramas and all I like is dumb, fast-paced action, take note, because Better Call Saul is easily far more slow-paced than The Walking Dead ever has been, and it comes in at number 2 on my list, which is no easy task. And that's because despite the fact that Season 2 moved at a snail's pace, arguably even slower than Season 1, it was the good kind of slow that was still fascinating and amazing to watch, as it featured a lot of highly nuanced character stories with great acting, and of course the signature amazing cinematography that was the hallmark of Breaking Bad and is now the hallmark of Better Call Saul. I dare say I liked Season 2 even better than Season 1, as it had me engaged throughout, and in my opinion had a much stronger ending that simply blew my mind. Better Call Saul continues to deliver as Breaking Bad's successor, and in my opinion doesn't get nearly as much recognition as it deserves. And finally, we come to my number 1 favorite show of 2016, which shouldn't be a huge shock to anyone familiar with my channel. It's Game of Thrones Season 6. Now, last year Game of Thrones also came in at number 1 with Season 5. However, I did mention it was a very close call with Leftovers Season 2. In fact, in retrospect, I think I actually should have went with The Leftovers as number 1. But this year, it wasn't even close. Game of Thrones gets my number 1 by a landslide. Season 6 was just absolutely amazing, and in this man's humble little opinion, no other show came anywhere close to being as good. Yes, the show did have some horrible, poorly written moments with the shenanigans in Dorne and Arya gaining Wolverine's regenerative powers, but I believe people love to hyper-focus on these one or two bad things for some reason. As for me, they were far outweighed by how amazing the rest of the season was. Seeing Jon's resurrection and transition from the Night's Watch to King of the North, to seeing Sansa get the revenge she so really deserved, to Arya becoming independent, to Daenerys finding strength and kicking ass, to Cersei turning a very grim situation to her advantage by using less than savory means. Overall, Season 6 had a lot of amazing moments and managed to deliver on a lot of things we've been waiting years to see. And the final 2 episodes were just simply amazing, and by far the strongest ending to a season this amazing show has ever had. And I don't mind telling you, those 2 episodes are my favorite episodes of this entire show. I do believe Game of Thrones has really outdone itself with Season 6, making it by far my favorite show of 2016. So that's it for my top 10 favorite shows of 2016. Be sure to keep up with my channel in 2017 as I review many of the shows I mentioned on this list, especially Game of Thrones, as I'm currently in the midst of my Season 7 predictions videos series. As well as I do many more videos on shows like Star Trek and Vikings and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.